She was not happy. And beware, folks. AB might be talking to Becky throughout the game day. They're best friends. Run it out, Wilson.
What happens when the most powerful name in the sport runs into the quiet arrival of someone who simply will not stay in the background? For years, Aya Wilson wasn't just a star in women's basketball, she felt like the center of it. MVP awards, championships, endorsement deals, and a level of respect that made her look untouchable. She carried herself like a player who had already proven everything that needed proving. But then, behind the scenes, something changed. One private phone call, one closed-door conversation, and suddenly the future started getting discussed without her standing in the middle of it. Not in public, not on TV, not in a headline at first. But in the spaces that matter, where decisions get shaped before fans ever hear about them, the tone started shifting. And the spotlight she believed was permanently hers began drifting toward the one player she never wanted to fully acknowledge as her equal, Caitlin Clark. The question isn't just whether Wilson got blindsided. The real question is whether she saw it coming early and still couldn't stop it, because confidence can look like control until the day you realize the game has started moving on.
WNBA champion, A'ja Wilson.
This isn't a story about stats, box scores, or highlight compilations. It's about pride, rivalry, ego, and how the wrong emotional choices can create a chain reaction you can't reverse. It's about the kind of tension that grows quietly over time until it becomes bigger than a simple competition between two athletes. Because the truth is, the most dangerous opponent is not always the one you challenge openly. The most dangerous opponent is the one who rises while you're still staring at your own reflection, still trying to protect the version of yourself you worked so hard to build. When a player reaches the top, they don't just fall because someone scores more points. They fall when they start fighting change instead of adapting to it. And when a long-held grudge becomes part of your public identity, it can stop you from seeing what's happening right in front of you. In this story, the vendetta doesn't just create drama. It becomes fuel for a shift in power that begins ending a dynasty before the person at the top even realizes it's happening.
Caitlin Clark has captured the basketball world.
Yeah, it's pretty amazing.
To understand how the tension reached this point, you have to rewind to 2022. At that time, Wilson was sitting comfortably at the absolute summit. She had the awards that people use as proof of greatness. She had the championship rings that turn players into legends. She had the big brand deals, the kind that bring money, attention, and status all at once. She had magazine covers and long feature stories painting her as the face of the sport. TV analysts spoke about her like she was the clear best of her generation without needing debate. The entire environment around her told her the same message. You are the queen of this league, and you earned it. And when you live in that reality long enough, it can start to feel permanent. It can start to feel like the league is built around you, not just that you are one of its best players. That's why the early signs of change mattered so much, because when you're used to being the standard, even a small shift feels like someone trying to take your identity away.
First time, Wilson is watching the moment she found out she won that third MVP trophy.
When Wilson looked in the mirror each morning, she saw someone who fought her way to the top with skill and willpower. She saw a player who earned every ounce of praise, not with hype, but with results. In her mind, she had the undisputed right to be the center of attention in women's basketball. She wasn't interested in splitting the spotlight with anyone, and definitely not with a college guard from Iowa who hadn't played 1 minute in the pros. Then Caitlin Clark happened, and the ground started moving under everything Wilson believed about her place in the sport. Clark didn't enter the national conversation like most prospects do. She didn't slowly build recognition and wait for the pro league to introduce her properly. She forced the world to pay attention before anyone could decide whether they wanted to. Her scoring wasn't just impressive, it was loud. Her range wasn't just deep, it was the type of deep that changes how defenses even think. Her confidence didn't feel rehearsed, it felt natural, like she expected the moment to belong to her. Arenas started selling out early for her games. TV ratings jumped in ways women's basketball had been trying to unlock for years. Sports shows led with her highlights every night. And the more it happened, the more it became clear that this wasn't a short trend. It was a real shift in attention that Wilson couldn't control.
A'ja, she's been A1 since day
Top tier.
but she was on a whole different level while making WNBA history.
Clark's rise pulled in every type of fan. Hardcore basketball people watched because the skill was undeniable. Casual fans watched because she made the sport feel like an event. People who never cared about women's basketball suddenly scheduled their day around her games. The media couldn't stop telling her story. The clips didn't just circulate, they dominated the conversation. And for Wilson, that attention didn't feel like shared success. It felt like a takeover. Instead of celebrating Clark as a new engine for the entire sport, Wilson started treating her like a threat. And that was the turning point that set the rest of the story in motion. It started in small ways that gave her room to deny it. A social media like that felt a little too perfectly timed. A vague post that sounded harmless but landed like a message. Content boosts that highlighted veteran greatness right when Clark had a huge moment, almost like a counterpunch. Whenever Clark's name exploded in headlines, Wilson's online presence would suddenly shift to reminders of what real excellence looks like and what sustained greatness really means. She didn't always say Clark's name, but she didn't have to. The audience could read the tone. Over time, it created a pattern. Clark rises, Wilson responds. Clark wins attention, Wilson tries to reclaim it. And the more Clark grew, the more Wilson's reaction started to look less like leadership and more like insecurity.
Even before Sunday, Clark was on a record-breaking run.
When Clark got major recognition that could have been celebrated as a win for women's sports, Wilson's energy didn't match the moment. The online vibe felt cold. The skepticism was visible. The resentment was hard to miss. And that's the thing about jealousy, it doesn't stay hidden forever, no matter how carefully you try to package it. It starts leaking out through little comments, certain phrases, and the way you answer questions you don't want to answer. Wilson's interviews began to sound loaded. She used phrases like real impact and long-term excellence in ways that felt designed to quietly shrink Clark's contributions. She shifted topics when reporters brought Clark up. She spoke like someone defending territory, not like someone welcoming growth. Over time, it became personal in the eyes of the public. Every Clark milestone started looking like a trigger for Wilson. And that was the fatal mistake. Instead of letting Clark's popularity become a rising tide for the league, Wilson turned it into a personal scoreboard. She convinced herself she was defending veterans and tradition, when what she was really defending was her ego against the uncomfortable reality that a younger, more marketable, more viral superstar had arrived and was taking oxygen from a room. And while fans argued about it, people in professional decision-making spaces were watching the behavior closely and forming their own conclusions.
Look at Clark. Yes!
Clark hits the three. Too much space. Nearly 10 million.
Now here's where the story moves into the part that most mainstream coverage doesn't explore. The way certain styles of play translate differently depending on how the game is officiated. Insiders call it the special whistle. In the WNBA, Wilson gets to the free throw line a lot. On the surface, that looks like pure dominance. A player so unstoppable that defenders can only stop her by fouling. But the critique is that part of her scoring rhythm relies on getting a steady stream of calls that the league often gives to stars. She's skilled, yes, but she's also mastered how to sell contact. The motions, the reactions, the timing, it's part of the craft. In the WNBA environment, that can be a weapon. The rules often favor offense, and star treatment is real in any major league. But international basketball can feel like a different world. The refs are more willing to let physical defense stand. They don't care about your MVP trophies. They don't care about your social media following. They don't care about your brand. They call what they call, and often they don't reward the same type of contact. So the fear becomes simple. What happens when a player's rhythm depends on calls that aren't coming?
Caitlin Clark is Time Magazine's 2024 Athlete of the Year.
According to the way this story is told in insider circles, scouts watched Wilson in international style environments and saw something that worried them. When the whistle changes, her efficiency changes. When defenders can be more physical without getting punished for every touch, her scoring doesn't look as automatic. It's not that she suddenly becomes bad. It's that the advantage she enjoys in her usual environment starts shrinking. And when Team USA is building toward the biggest stages, they don't just pick the best players in one league. They pick the players whose games travel cleanly. They pick the ones who can create offense even when nothing is comfortable. They want players who don't need perfect conditions to be effective. They want reliability under any rule set. That's why this kind of evaluation matters so much. Because international play is not a place where reputation can save you. On that stage, you either produce or you don't, and you have to do it without expecting special treatment.
A two-time Olympic gold medalist and two-time WNBA champion, A'ja Wilson.
Then you look at Clark, and the argument becomes easy for people who believe in her. When Clark scores, it doesn't depend on a whistle. It doesn't depend on officials rewarding her. She pulls up from deep and makes shots that are simply unguardable when she's in rhythm. She creates offense with spacing, timing, and range that forces defenses to stretch farther than they want to. If defenders bump her, she often plays through it. She doesn't build her game around begging for calls. She builds it around creating shots that no referee can erase. In this narrative, that's what makes her so valuable for any court in the world. Her game is portable. It doesn't need a friendly system. It doesn't need the same officiating style. It translates because it is built on skill that shows up anywhere. And when scouts compare the two styles side by side, the contrast feels sharp. One player thrives in a certain environment, the other can thrive in any environment. That's why some people started saying the future was being built around a different kind of star. Then came the list that changed the energy. Team USA reportedly released a preliminary selection pool for upcoming major international runs, and Wilson's name wasn't there. If you believe the sources, that moment hit Wilson like a wall. The player who believed she was untouchable suddenly got a message that sounded like the opposite. The program is moving forward without you. And the twist that made it worse is that the future looked like the same person Wilson spent time trying to diminish. The insider version says her reaction was intense, frantic calls, urgent conversations, and a push to get answers fast. Her camp allegedly tried to frame it as scheduling or confusion, but the public didn't buy it. Meanwhile, Clark reacted in the exact opposite way. No drama, no threats, no public complaints. Just a short thank you and excitement to work. That contrast wasn't small. It became the entire point. One looked like they were fighting to hold power. The other looked like they were ready to earn it calmly.
What's that, about 26 feet? When she's going to her left and in rhythm.
And that's where character becomes the real battleground, especially for international competition. Coaches don't just pick talent. They pick chemistry. They pick mental stability. They pick who can handle being watched by the world without turning the moment into a personal crisis. Because international basketball pressure is different. The crowds are louder and often hostile. The media is global. Every reaction gets captured. The officiating can feel unfair. The stakes are national, not personal. And if a player struggles to handle criticism at home, decision makers start wondering how they'll handle the pressure when the entire world is watching. In this story, Team USA coaches weren't only looking at points and rebounds. They were watching how players carry themselves, how they respond to rivals, and whether they can put the team above their own ego. Over 2 years, the claim is that Wilson's behavior created concerns. Every passive-aggressive moment was noticed. Every public shot at Clark got remembered. Every interview where she seemed bitter got added to the picture. It wasn't one event. It was a pattern.
This World Cup is different in terms of the number of teams that will participate.
That's why, in this telling, the choice became about culture as much as basketball. Team USA wants players who build each other up, not tear each other down. They want leaders who can share the stage. They want competitors who can sacrifice personal glory for team success. And in this narrative, Wilson looked like someone who needed everything to revolve around her. Clark looked like someone who could fit into any system and still shine without demanding attention. People also pointed to how Clark formed real chemistry with other young stars. The idea is that a new foundation was growing built on mutual respect and shared goals, not dominance and control. Clark took heat for 2 years without firing back. She let her game speak and kept her public tone steady. For sponsors and selectors, that stability matters because it suggests she can represent the country without creating chaos. Meanwhile, Wilson's reaction to being cut was framed as proof that the decision-makers were right, because instead of quiet determination, it became a loud emotional event that made her look fragile under pressure.
And A'ja Wilson, you could see her mouthing, she's on me, possession.
Aaliyah Boston doing this to the MVP Asia Wilson in Game 1 is insane. Caitlin Clark and Sophie Cunningham were just loving the way she was dominating Asia.
2026 is shaping up to be a big year in the sports world with global stages, iconic venues, and can't-miss moments.
So when you zoom out, this doesn't feel like one simple roster decision. It feels like the start of a bigger reset. Power almost never collapses with one public moment. It fades behind closed doors, through quiet evaluations and private choices that only become obvious later. Confidence can harden into entitlement. Leadership can turn into isolation. And when the balance shifts, you often don't get a full explanation, you just get consequences. That's why this story feels like it carries a warning for every superstar in the league. Legacy is real, but it doesn't guarantee protection forever. The sport is changing, the audience is changing, and influence is being measured differently now. If that shift is real, then Wilson may not be the last person to feel it. She may simply be the first obvious example of what happens when the future arrives while the past is still trying to hold the spotlight. And if women's basketball is truly entering a new era, the next question becomes simple: who's next to be replaced while they still think they're untouchable?